My next guest, Cam Ayala, gained television fame when he revealed as a contestant on The Bachelorette that he suffered from the chronic disease lymphedema. Cam's medical journey resulted in the amputation of his right leg above the knee. Cam continues to advocate for the lymphedema community and has now recently begun his journey as a new amputee. I am thrilled to introduce Cam Ayala. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rick Bontkowski, and this is the AMP'D UP211 Podcast. Cam, how you doing?
Good morning, Rick. How are you, brother?
Good to see you. So good to see you, and I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know you had a busy morning. Cam, your story in particular really fascinates me. Obviously, the first thing I want to ask you is, how are you doing right now? How are you feeling? And how many days post-op are you right now?
Okay, so for starters, I am officially 30 days post-op, so right at about a month. Had it on June 22nd, and it was above knee amputation, and it was planned, so it wasn't like it was a result of some traumatic injury or circumstance. So 1 month out. How am I doing? Comes in waves in terms of, things with the phantom pains and phantom sensations, which I'm sure we'll get into later in the conversation. So adjusting to that, adjusting just to like mobility in general with my forearm crutches and, navigating and still trying to be as active as possible, but still understanding some of the limits. And then emotionally and spiritually, there's days or there's moments where I can feel pretty down, but I've developed a way of kind of snapping out of it, right? Because I think it's important for people to feel all of the emotions, but you don't want to stay in those dark places. They can serve as a good point of reference as you get to a better headspace as part of the recovery process. So overall, I'm feeling really blessed. I'm feeling energized and excited for each milestone ahead.
Yeah. And, when I became an amputee 6 years ago, it's a good way to put it, there are so many unknowns, and everyone's journey is very different. So I usually get inundated by newer amputees, struggling amputees. How is this going to go? How is this going to feel? Where is that going to lead me? And I think my answer typically is, it's different for everyone. It's your limb is going to change differently. Prosthetics and the evolution of how it feels to wear a prosthesis is going to change over time. And for some, it's an accelerated situation. You're a young guy, and I know you're very fit. So you will probably, I don't want to jinx you, but probably you are going to acclimate very quickly. Now, when someone comes to me and I know they have, let's say, comorbidities, or they just struggle physically in general, usually that's when I give advice of it's time to start doing the work of getting yourself physically well, stronger, more mobile. Do all of those things, because that will help you in this journey, which can be grueling at times. And, me personally, being 53 years old, I spent about 2 years getting to what I considered to be normal. And when I say normal, I can work, I can play, I can wear a prosthesis all day and not really be suffering in any way. Yes, there's moments where it's a little uncomfortable. I wear an adjustable, so I have to loosen it a little bit. But where I had a confidence and a sense of empowerment about being an amputee, like, this is very normal. I think your medical journey is, to be quite honest, Cam, it's extraordinary to me. It's very long. It's sort of vast in nature. And I do want to talk about all of the bachelor things, let's call them, or the bachelor world, nation. I do want to get into that, because I do think it's very, very relevant to your particular journey. In and, don't take this the wrong way, in my mind, not necessarily to sensationalize it, but more to see it as just a component of what I've noticed in following you, watching you on YouTube, reading articles. It was really part of your evolution just as a person. So
Completely.
going back to the medical piece, you had lymphedema, and you still have lymphedema. This is something that is still prevalent in your system, correct? This is a chronic illness. Can you explain some of the background with that?
Absolutely. So I'll just kind of, for the listeners, give a high level, kind of a 10,000 foot view of what lymphedema is, so you have a better kind of understanding as I kind of go back in time and explain, my journey with different milestones. So high level, everybody has a lymphatic system, right? And your lymph vessels are like, each one is about the size of a single hair follicle. So it's really, really small. And they run parallel to your vascular system, to your veins. And they have a very similar function in terms of pumping and moving fluid from the base of your toes all the way up to your upper extremity. And there's even lymphatic fluid in our brains. So basically, when you have lymphedema, that means you have a compromised lymphatic system. And it can be anywhere in your body. Typically, it's most prevalent in an extremity, whether it's an arm or a leg. But patients can have it in their stomachs, in their genitals, head and neck, really anywhere. So the two types of lymphedema are primary and secondary. So I actually have primary lymphedema, which is the hereditary side. So I was actually born with it, but I didn't start presenting with the symptoms of swelling, chronic swelling, until I was 11 years old. And then on the other side, there's the secondary lymphedema, which that's a lot more common in our world. You may have had friends or family or people in your community, specifically patients who've had breast cancer. It's very common for breast cancer patients to have lymph nodes removed under their arms, or to have a mastectomy, or any type of chemo or radiation or any other surgical intervention. So when you have that compromised lymphatic system, basically it does not move that fluid from top to, or from bottom to top, the way that it's supposed to circulate. So then basically that extremity or wherever it's affected starts to basically build up that fluid. And it's not fat and it's not water, it's lymph fluid, which is rich in protein. So one of the other issues with lymphedema patients, other than having a swollen leg or arm, is we're very prone to reoccurrences of infection, because our lymphatic system is correlated with our immune system. So if you think about it, if your pipes aren't properly moving the water, and next thing you know, you're going to spring a leak or things are going to flood. So that's basically kind of high level lymphedema. Again, I have primary, and my symptoms started when I was age 11, going through puberty and the growth spurts, because I'm about 6'4". So when I hit that first growth spurt, my legs were growing pretty fast, and my right leg ended up being 1.5 inches shorter than my left. And that was kind of the first triggering symptom that my parents knew something was off. Because when I was playing like YMCA basketball, you can picture me like running up and down the court, but I was almost kind of limping because my hips weren't aligned, because my right leg was shorter. So when we went to orthopedic surgeon just to get some x-rays, they said, yeah, you can see here very clearly that there's a discrepancy in the right and left. And we think you may have bone cancer, because we see some spotting on your femur. So that's what caused them to do the initial bone biopsy surgery, where they just basically took about a pinky's width fragment of my right femur to basically run the pathology, make sure it wasn't cancerous. And thank goodness it wasn't. But as I was recovering from that biopsy surgery and starting physical therapy and trying to get my strength and mobility back, the swelling just got worse and worse each day. And it took about a full year for me to finally get the diagnosis of primary lymphedema. And that's me living in Houston, Texas, which is the largest medical center in the world. So having accessibility to some of the top specialists, and it's still taking a year. Now, granted, this was back in 2001. So even still to this day, there's not a whole lot of understanding of the lymphatic system, which is why it continues to be this medical mystery for a lot of doctors and therapists and nurses. So just one more thing, and then I'll let you take the next question. There's over 10 million Americans that suffer with lymphedema. And to give you kind of a point of reference, that's more than AIDS, MLS, and Parkinson's patients combined. So 10 million. Wow. So, and it's also the most understudied system in the medical school curriculum. They only cover it for about 15 to 30 minutes in a 4-year period. So it makes sense why these doctors aren't properly educated and informed. So when they start their residency and start seeing patients, they'll just say, oh, you're fat, do diet and exercise. Or, oh, let's give you a water pill. That'll get the swelling down. But oftentimes it's lymphedema, and patients need a very different treatment protocol.
Hey amputees, I'd like to take a moment to introduce everyone to the liner wand. We all know how bacteria and odor can be a major issue with prosthetic liners, and the liner wand is the solution. Did you know that if you're using soap and water, you may be making the problem worse? The liner wand uses a patented formula that deletes all bacteria and smells for 2 weeks. The liner wand is available as an affordable subscription or individually, and it always ships for free. To learn more, visit thelinerwand.com. That's THELINERWAND.com. Use code 211, that's 211, and receive 50% off your first subscription today. You can also use the code RICK, R-I-C-K, and receive 25% off your cleanser subscription as well. That's thelinerwand.com. You know, I appreciate how well versed you are on your condition. I appreciate that you speak to it in a way that completely demystifies the situation, and being able to cite statistics, being able to understand what's happening in the medical community is such a huge piece of advocacy. And I think the reason why, when I was looking at your story and you know, hearing you and watching interviews and going, you know, this guy kind of knows his shit. Like he's not just, you know, like he's not just you know, kind of floundering through this.
Yeah, memorizing a brochure or something.
Exactly. He's well spoken, he's well read, he speaks to this, and I can tell that you becoming an advocate for awareness was just a natural part of what it seems like you are as a person, to be able to reach out to that community, sort of embrace it and say, hey, you know, let me kind of help you understand this, or let me help you cope with what you're doing. And I would think at a young age, because you were diagnosed, you know, young, going through any chronic illness. I've talked to very young amputees. I've talked to different people that sort of discover there's this difference going on with me. Mm-hmm. I mean, that can make growing up pretty difficult. I mean, what was your experience like as a kid? Because I'm guessing they manage all of this through compression, mm-hmm. and I'm sure there's different, whether it's, you know, medication, and I'm not super familiar, and I'm going to pretend to be with the treatments. But what was that like growing up?
Yeah, and I've had several conversations over this past year and asked kind of a similar question. And what I've realized now as a 33-year-old patient, at age 11, when I was diagnosed, basically the doctor hands me this trifold, and it's basically like, you have lymphedema, what's next? Because, you know, in 2001, the internet didn't have all of the content and the accessibility to content, and even social media wasn't really around then. Maybe Facebook and MySpace in its very early infancy. So I did not have a support system, online community. And that trifold brochure that they hand me in a clinic, basically you look at it and it shows the worst case scenarios. I mean, patients with elephantitis, with huge arms, huge legs, and they tell you lymphedema is progressive in nature and there's no cure. Good luck. Oh, and here's the things you need to avoid. You need to avoid bug bites. I live in Houston, Texas, like the mosquito capital of the South. Can't avoid that. Avoid cuts and abrasions. I played football, baseball, and basketball. I ride my bike around the neighborhood. Like, what the hell do you expect? I'm not going to live in a bubble. And they start talking about how you have to wear a compression garment and you have to go see a certified lymphedema massage therapist. And there, at the time, wasn't really many surgical options. So basically, at age 11, when this is just unloaded on me, and at 11, where you're already very impressionable and you have big pipe dreams like, I wanted to be in the NBA, or I wanted to be in the NFL, or I wanted to be a movie star because I did theater too, all of these things. And then all of a sudden I have this diagnosis that basically says, that's not going to happen. Throw those dreams away. But instead of allowing what that trifold told me, what the doctors told me, even what some of my coaches told me, I was bound to become a man at age 11 because that's where I grew up in that moment. And I made a commitment to myself and to my parents and to my friends that I was not going to let lymphedema control me. I was going to control it. I was going to do everything that they told me, from compression garments, compression pumps, and certain exercises and diets. So basically, the journey is very different from patient to patient, because as I was mentioning earlier, a lot of lymphedema patients get it secondary to cancer. So it's like, okay, they've already had this terrible cancer battle, and Lord willing, they win that cancer battle. But now the souvenir is, okay, we cured your cancer, but now you have a lifelong disease called lymphedema. Good luck. And that just doesn't sit right with me. And that's why I really have dove headfirst into advocacy and awareness, because, awareness is great because it kind of gets the conversation going. But if you're a patient living with it, you need to be your own advocate, because no one's going to fight harder for you than you. So luckily in 2022, we have an abundance of resources online. There's a lot more specialty clinics across the world. So we're on the right trajectory. But if we're thinking of this like an Ironman race or, a marathon, we're still in very much phase 1. So it's just knowing that your body is going to change. And because lymphedema is a chronic disease, it does require daily self-care. So if you choose to not wear your compression garments, I got my shrinker on now, but coincidentally, I've been wearing compression garments similar to a shrinker, but for my full leg since I was 11. Right. So that's pretty much all I know. So when I heard about the prosthetic process, I'm like, okay, like I'm already used to putting something on every single day, because if I don't, you got to bear the consequences, which for me is excessive swelling and can be more pain. So I tell every patient that I used to counsel when I was selling medical devices for lymphedema patients, the most popular question I got was, well, how often do I have to wear these garments, and how often do I have to use this pump? And my follow-up question to them was, does gravity or lymphedema take any days off? The answer is no. And I'm sure it rings true also for the amputee community when it comes to maybe doing certain exercises, wearing your shrinker, or whatever other components is necessary to keep your extremity at a manageable size so your prosthesis can be functional and fit and comfortable. So I'm looking forward to actually getting the prosthesis and continuing that discipline that's already been embedded in me since age 11.
Yeah, and I think that's where I start to become inspired by you, because I'm like, this guy's going to smash it. I mean, he's going to crush this thing, because he's had this life journey of acceptance, taking the initiative, embracing a chronic condition, knowing that it's not easy. It requires a lot of self-care. And as I'm checking all those boxes, I'm thinking, well, that's everything amputees have to do. They have to embrace it. And I pound away on this whole concept of day one, which is it's not the day of the surgery. It's the day of acceptance. It's the day that you say, this limb isn't growing back, and now I have to get on board. It's a lifelong contract, and I'm going to make this thing happen. I'm going to kill it, And when I think about yourself and what you've been through previous, when you say I'm excited, that to me is very inspiring. And those are the kinds of words that newer amputees need to hear. I know that you have much ground to cover in terms of your residual limb management, in terms of prosthetics available, liners, shrinkers, skin care. I mean, the list is certainly endless. But when I look at someone like yourself who has that enthusiasm, okay, to say, this is the body God gave me, and I am going to use it to the best of my ability. I am going to bring my best self to every single situation. So, becoming an amputee, certainly as it was a planned procedure for you, this can still be very daunting. And it can be, I think, again, going back to, there's a lot of unknowns.
Right.
And when you think about your recovery, let's say post-op, I mean, literally days after, I've seen some YouTube on you, and I mean, you're in a place of, okay, this is not easy. I saw you in a walker for the first time, and that's can be kind of sobering, kind of humbling. Like, okay, you're kind of getting like your armor on, like, okay, I'm getting ready for battle now. This is going to be rough. So if you can take us through how that felt, right after surgery, and I'm sure it's fresh in your mind because you're 30 days out.
Exactly. And I love what you just said about, preparing for battle, because as you were speaking, it was just kind of running through my mind. One of the terms that the lymphedema community has used is, you're a lymphedema warrior, because when you have a chronic disease for the rest of your life, you have that constant battle. And to prepare yourself and to be in that battle, you got to have a warrior mentality. There's going to be rough days where you're in a new environment. You got to adapt. Your body changes. You got to adapt. There's new, equipment or new technology. You got to adapt. So now that I'm a amputee warrior, I see myself as just now, okay, God has given me a new mission. Here's the new tools. Here's the new destination that we're aiming towards. And so seeing it through that lens has really helped me, because like I'm a believer and I'm not shy about my faith. And the Bible tells us, you got to put on your armor and you got to go to battle every single day. It's not easy being a Christian. It's not easy being a lymphedema patient. It's not easy being a amputee patient. But when you have the mentality and the mindset of gratitude and knowing that God gives his toughest battles to his toughest warriors, I see this very much as a blessing, right? Like, I feel like in our society, especially my generation and the one even younger than me, is, everybody wants to be famous or they want to stand out. But oftentimes the way they do that is by copying other people. And one of my favorite quotes, it was in The Reliance on Self, what is it? It's from Ralph Waldo Emerson, but it's basically imitation is suicide to the soul. So this gives me an opportunity to be unique, right? And I know there may be other amputees of similar presentations, but like, again, God is putting me through this because he knows I can get through it. And in that journey, I can hopefully inspire a couple of people along the way and make them feel like, hey, he did it, I can do it too. And to answer your question about what did it feel like that first moment, waking up from the amputation and how did that feel? Well, because I had basically 2.5 months to prepare for the amputation, I was working really hard with my personal trainer and, getting my upper body and my core as strong as possible. So those first, weeks and now month post-op, I already kind of had a good head start. But what I wanted to do specifically, because I did speak to a lot of amputees prior to the surgery, is I had the nurses, as soon as they were transferring me from my operating room bed to then my recovery room bed, I actually wore my my sleeping mask, because I didn't want to look down at my residual limb until the following day, because, you're still drugged up from the anesthesia and pain medication. So I didn't want to have it be my first moment in a discombobulated state. So what I made sure was I gave them the directive that when they put me in my recovery room bed, I had them lay a pillow vertically. And when they put the blanket, so when I looked down, it appeared that I had 2 full able-bodied limbs. And so the next morning, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit more, but we're currently filming a documentary about my journey of the amputation. And it's
great.
Actually being filmed by my church. They have a great production team.
Oh,
and I wanted my pastor to be there with me the next morning when I looked down at my residual limb for the first time. And so the camera crew's in there, the producer's in there, and then my pastor walks in, and first thing he did is he said this beautiful prayer. And then it was like, okay, here's the grand reveal, because at that point in time, it had just been research, preparation, but there's nothing that can prepare you for that first moment when you look down. And when you look down, it may be denial. It may be anger. For me, it was all those things.
Yeah.
And so having my pastor there and knowing that God's been with me this whole time and he's gone before me, it still gave me a sense of peace. But I removed the blanket, removed the pillow, and looked down at my residual limb. And I was overwhelmed with emotion, but I'm really good at snapping out of it. Like right now, I'm like in tears, but I know that God wanted me to have.
So.
I knew that God wanted me to have that moment, because one thing that I've learned in this 2-month journey leading up to it, one of the sermons that my pastor talked about is it's okay to wrestle with God, to be angry, to be frustrated, because that is what really sets up a genuine relationship, right? Like your friendships aren't always sunshine and rainbows, maybe with your parents, maybe with your coworkers. So if you're religious, your relationship with God shouldn't be any different. So I did have that moment of frustration and anger and bitterness and, the whole why me? But then when you flip that and you snap out of it and you say, well, why not me? God has already made me strong. In moments where I am weak, he is Christ in me. And that is always strength I can pull from. So after I kind of got the cries and the anger, I just quickly, call it Forrest Stump and made some jokes. And my pastor brought me a gift, and it was literally one sock. He said, I guess you don't need the other one. And we exchanged some other jokes, because levity has always kind of been a coping mechanism for me. And I know it's not for every person, but for me, it kind of helps.
I'm really big on one-legged jokes,
Oh, absolutely. So
all of my friends, just so you know, all of my friends are two-legged freaks. So that's just what I call them.
Right. And we're both, on our last leg here. So just having that support from not only my church, but my friends and family and just strangers online from all over the world. And I know we're probably going to get into this shortly about the whole Bachelor side of things, but that was also the very first time that I had gotten positive press. Outlets like People Magazine, US Weekly, Entertainment Tonight had finally acknowledged that I have lymphedema. They acknowledged that it is a serious condition. They showed the amputation, and they even highlighted my faith, which is unheard of typically for those more left-leaning, a little bit more liberal entertainment platforms. They don't really like to highlight that. So I'm blessed that I was able to have the platform and part of my journey thrown out there for the public to, realize I'm not doing this on my own. This is all God guiding me through the journey and having friends and family along the way. So I know that was a long rant, but that was really my first, emotions going through it.
Yeah, it's for you to be that transparent, that vulnerable. It's remarkable to me for you to be able to share that with an audience, and for them to know that when I see you in this space, this emotional space, this sort of, coming to the truth kind of space, all I see in that, Cam, is strength. That's all I see. Strength. This guy he's a strong dude. He is on his journey, and he's just completely real with himself. We're going to take a quick pause and do an episode of Amps You Should Know. When we circle back, stay tuned, because when we circle back, we are going to explore Cam's experience with the Bachelor Nation, and really in truth how everything has seemed to kind of come back around for him. And a lot of the press, a lot of the notoriety that is coming his way is very acknowledging of his journey. And it's in my opinion, it's really beautiful. So don't go away. We're going to be right back. Hey everyone, I want to introduce our audience to Harry Gibson. Harry Gibson is an 11-year-old Symes amputee. He's been an amputee for 1 year, and Harry is an active amputee who faces all of his life challenges head on. I actually discovered Harry through social media. He is a active, very active, competitive football player and continues to inspire everyone that he comes in contact with. You know, when I first discovered Harry, I think the first thing that I noticed is how highly articulate he is, how enthusiastic he is, how committed he is to his amputee journey, and that he just seems to radiate positivity. He continues to update us on his journey, and I really am so excited to see what's in store for Harry as he continues to progress into becoming a young man. Uh, I would say if you want to look him up, you will truly be inspired. He continues to raise donations for the EAFF camps. And Harry Gibson, I mean, just an amp that you should definitely know. Hey everyone, we are back with Cam Ayala. We've been talking about his journey medically with lymphedema and certainly most recently his amputation of his right leg above the knee. And I want to go to a place with you, Cam, that has very much captured the interest of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is very much a part of your journey. And in my humble opinion, I think very much a part of your struggle in terms of, you know, life journey and humanity and civility. And I mean, make a list, man. This thing kind of put you through the ringer. I kind of struggled with doing the show prep on your bachelor, you know, bachelorette, bachelor in paradise. That whole journey to me was kind of gut wrenching in a lot of ways. And, you know, to see someone who is suffering from a chronic illness, managing it well. Okay, here's this fit, young, good-looking guy, goes on the Bachelorette, you know, sort of kind of explodes on the scene, right? Because, you know, you had kind of a remarkable sort of appearance, and then suddenly, like, there's this target on your back. Yep. Yeah, it was like, whoa, what's happening here? And I, you know, of course, the first question I want to ask you is, you know, why the Bachelorette? But then if you could kind of walk me through some of how that deterioration sort of occurred, if you don't mind. And obviously, sure, if it's not too painful for you.
No, and I do obviously have to acknowledge that without doing those shows, Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise, I wouldn't have the platform that I now have. So for as bitter as I've been at times towards the franchise and towards that whole experience, again, the older I get, I just realize and accept how essential it was to my journey. And I think oftentimes just people in general, regardless of what they go through, when you can find the purpose in that pain or find some sort of positive from that opportunity, then you find the ability to cope and to move on and ultimately to get stronger. But every person moves differently with that process. I mean, for me, it took really almost 3 years, actually a little over 3 years, to finally come to peace and get some vindication. So I'll rewind back here and kind of give you from start to finish, again, high level of how the whole thing started. So you wanted to know, why the Bachelorette. So this was in 2019, and I was living in Austin, Texas, and I had just gotten out about a 9-month relationship. It was a pretty serious relationship in the sense that there was talk about engagement and marriage, but it had to be fast-tracked because my ex-girlfriend is Canadian, and her student visa had just expired, and she didn't really do all of the proper due diligence to understand what it took to get a renewal because she was no longer a student. So when she got her visa denied, basically she got deported. And the only way she could have stayed in the United States is if we were to get married at, like, courthouse, do it fast. And unfortunately, when we talked through all the different scenarios, pros and cons, we just realized that, it's not meant to be. And she basically got deported and went back to Canada. And I really haven't talked to her ever since. So at that point of, being single and living in Austin, where it's very much a kind of a party town, if you will, and the guy to girl ratio is very much in the guy's favors. Me and my buddies were just kind of going out and partying. And one night bumped into a bachelorette party coincidentally. And one of the girls in that group kind of took a liking and gravitation towards me. And we started talking. Turns out she was a producer, not for the Bachelor community anymore. She'd done it in the past, but she said, I think you'd be great for the show. And wasn't really something I wanted to get into. I had a buddy who was on it like a couple years prior, but didn't really watch it. It's, in my opinion, more of a female targeted audience, but men watch it because, they're probably forced to from their girlfriends or their wives, and they just kind of get sucked in and watch it. But so she basically nominated me, and literally the next day I'm getting a call from an LA area code. And after about a month or two of auditioning and different casting calls, they had selected me. So, you had mentioned, it started out so strong. Well, it's because when I went to the live studio taping, when Hannah Brown was like first publicly announced as the Bachelorette, they basically randomly selected 5 of the 30 guys to come out there and meet her basically 3 days before we went to that mansion, the famous Bachelor mansion with the entrances for night one. Right. So I got that head start. And when I met her, the first thing I did was this little freestyle rap or whatever. It's kind of cheesy. Yeah, but it was basically enough to compel her to give me a rose before the show even started, really. And that had never happened before in Bachelor Nation. So you had mentioned having a big target on my back. Well, I did, but also literally had a target on my chest, which was that first rose. So going into the mansion night one of the biggest fears for people is getting sent home night one. That's like super embarrassing. But I knew that I was basically affirmed very quickly, and that was very threatening to a lot of guys. So that's where...
Did you realize it was going to be this competitive? I mean, when you went into this thing, I would think to some degree you're like starry-eyed, but at the same time, did you have an uh-oh moment? Like, man, these guys they're coming after me. Like, this is not cool.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that was part of the show, if you will. And what I did just in terms of research, when I got casted, it was basically during Colton Underwood's season of The Bachelor. He was the Bachelor. And so I watched every episode just to kind of get familiar with the structure of the show and kind of see the flow of it. And I kind of knew how it worked, high level. Hey, there's a bunch of people competing for one person. It gets dirty, especially towards the end when there's like fantasy suites, et cetera, and the families are involved. So I knew that journey had the potential of getting pretty intense.
Volatile.
And for me, it was intense very quickly because of getting that first rose. But where it all kind of went downhill was about 2.5 weeks into the journey. It was right before kind of a group date with all the guys. It was just really heavy on my heart that I hadn't talked about my lymphedema. And I thought that was important because in the past, I've had these random bouts of infection. Like I talked about earlier about lymphedema patients getting random bouts of infection. And through those episodes of infections, when I was dating, girls seriously, the dynamic of the relationship switched. It went from Cam being the guy who's active, athletic, dancing at the bars and going on hikes on the weekends, going to concerts, to all of a sudden
so
he's in the hospital. Man. Yeah, he's got to learn how to walk again. So now I need a caretaker, not just a partner in crime having a fun time in Austin. So that's actually ruined a lot of my past relationships. So it was something I was very self-conscious about. And I never talked about my lymphedema on my social media prior to the show because it's something I kind of hid and didn't want sympathy for. And
so what was, not to slow you down, but what was, so you're on the show, I would think it's sort of like sensory overload. because there's like cameras and
You're
there's like all
mic'd
this
up
stuff.
all the time.
Yeah, you're mic'd up and there's all this stuff happening. I mean, I'd be like hyper self-conscious about how I look and just everything going on in your mind. And at some point you go, you know what? I've got to tell her. I've got to tell her, like, this is something that if I am going to be serious about this, possibly engage someone, possibly marry someone, this is my truth. So in essence, does the Bachelorette serve as the catalyst for, you know, for lack of a better phrase, you're sort of coming out and saying, I've got this disease? And, you know, doing that in such a public way, again, I go back to strength.
Yeah. And you
it's just
touched
strength.
on it perfectly, because that's essentially what it was. It was my lymphedema coming out, and being someone who never posted about it to then all of a sudden announcing it to literally millions of people across the world was something that gave me a lot of anxiety, because I actually talked to several producers the night before that all went down, and I was like literally like in tears. It's like I don't know how to approach this, but I have to talk to her about it. And you know,
and what did they tell you? Did they offer advice or what?
No, they were basically like, yes, you know, this is what makes you unique. And I said, well, yeah, because to your point, Rick, this was my headspace, was if she, being Hannah Brown, and myself were taking this journey seriously, the end goal is to be married. And when you're at the altar and you exchange wedding vows and you say things in sickness and in health, I had to make sure that she was aware of the disease and aware of what it's meant in my past relationships. And I actually told her, I said, look, there's several guys out here in this group that are physically stronger than I am. They're younger than me. But I said, look, I have a very different strength. My strength comes from managing this disease that I've had for, at that point, over 20 years. And I have a lot of empathy.
Warrior.
Exactly. And I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for people in general who have any type of disability. So she actually responded very, very well when I told her about it. Unfortunately, literally about 10 minutes later, she goes and has a conversation with another guy in the mansion. And that guy basically told her that, oh, Cam's making up this medical sob story so you feel sorry for him and give him what he calls a pity rose. And first off, the word pity rose never even came out of my mouth. I mean, that was completely fabricated by a guy named Mike Johnson. And then Hannah brings me back and she gives me the whole line, hey, Cam, we need to talk. And Rick, I'm sure you know, when a woman tells you that, it's probably not a good thing.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah, that's literally a tail between the legs. And so she told me, she's like, though I appreciate, you know, your vulnerability and telling me about, you know, your medical journey, I just have to question the timing of it. It just seems very calculated and manipulative. And I don't know. I just need time to think about it. And at that moment, like, I just wanted to be done with the whole journey, because I'm like, this is the first time I've been public about my lymphedema, and it's literally being thrown in my face.
In your face,
for a freaking disease. It'd be one thing if I was telling a sob story like, oh, my puppy died, or oh, you know, XYZ, you know, very
no, this is serious
mild
stuff, man. I mean, chronic
shit.
illness.
I live with this.
And so, this is your whole life. It's your whole life. When someone looks you in the eye and denies you what has been your life experience, this is not something that you found out about a couple months before coming on the show.
Right.
You had been living with this your whole life.
Yep.
And then to suddenly be told, well, yeah, you know, it seems like you're gaming the system here, my friend.
Yep.
It's like, really?
Yeah.
Like, how could you not see, you know, the strength and the vulnerability in this? And then for everything to sort of shift to this other space of, it's almost like at that point, everyone's against you. And now it's almost like you're on this mission to prove I have this disease. Like,
so that's
please
basically
understand.
What happens. Yeah. So as a result of that conversation with Hannah, I got eliminated that night at the rose ceremony. And I got sent home, and just was so furious and sad and all of the things, because when you're out there and when we're filming, you don't get your cell phone. We don't get to watch TV. We have no connection with the outside world. So I didn't have my friends or family to confide in. I was just literally so alone. And the producers who claim to be your friend, I mean, I get it. It's reality TV. You have to have drama. You have to have personas and characters. And I was painted as a villain at that point in time.
Yeah.
So regardless of me sharing something very vulnerable like my chronic disease, they had to double down on this villain edit and narrative. So 2 days later, when I'm back home in Austin, I'm just like depressed and honestly trying to reacclimate. I have hundreds of missed calls and text messages because when I won that first rose, that aired 2 months before the show was actually aired out. So all of a sudden, thousands of new followers on social media, people reaching out that I hadn't heard from in years. And it was just all honestly overwhelming. And then having to grapple with the fact that I opened up about my disease that I'm self-conscious about, and I got sent home because of it. So then 2 days later, I get a call from The Bachelor, one of the producers, and they were already talking to me about Bachelor in Paradise, which is the spinoff show, which we recorded 2 months after The Bachelorette aired.
Was that an exercise, again, just my curiosity, Bachelor in Paradise, was that an exercise in seeking redemption? Is that how you would say it?
100%. And that was the allure. Like the producers that I talked to, like even acknowledged the fact that what happened with me was not fair. And like, we can't believe Mike did that. I'm like, well, some producer had to, hoist Mike into doing that or saying that. Yeah. And so they were literally, that's what they were saying. Rick is like, you know what, Cam, Bachelorette, it's over with. Honestly, Paradise is way more your vibe. There's a lot more girls and guys there, people who've been through the journey just like you. And there's already girls from other seasons that have been asking about you. And they even got me in contact with other men who were on Paradise who ended up getting engaged. So the process worked for them. So they pulled a hard sell. And I, like a mouse, I took the cheese and I was like, okay, well, it can't get any worse. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to go back to work because I'm going to get paid to be on Bachelor in Paradise pretty well. I'm going to get in the best physical condition I can, and I'm going to find my woman out there. I'm going to be a proud lymphedema patient, and all is going to be well. Fast forward 2 months later, and I get there, and just, there was one girl in particular that I was really into prior to filming, and when I met her, she just kind of had already planned which guys she wanted to be with. They had been talking before the show, kind of strategizing. So I just knew that that wasn't the right environment for me. And sure enough, when they edited out me talking about lymphedema on The Bachelorette, the conversation I had with Hannah, when they edited out me talking about it on Bachelor in Paradise, the last time that I was on TV for the Bachelor franchise was the Bachelor in Paradise live reunion, where they bring the cast members back and they kind of have a recap
and they blurred out your shirt.
Exactly. So for the people who don't know, I told the producers, okay, I'll come to this reunion, but I'm literally going to make a shirt that says, I have lymphedema, Google it, so you guys can't censor me anymore. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is the thing that I have. I deal with it. And there's 10 million Americans who are just begging to have some sort of representation. And this was really before Bachelor Nation and really our society in general became ultra sensitive to being more inclusive to all sorts of different people, whether it's their gender, sexual preference, disabilities, etc. So at that point, I was just being thrown to the side. And when I wore that shirt, the next day when it aired, blurred out like it was some sort of curse word or profanity.
Yeah,
so
that's remarkable.
I was fired up. Fired up.
How could you not be? And, so many of these conversations that I'm having with yourself, high functioning amputees that live in that advocacy space, all of this is about awareness, and it is about the normalization of being an amputee. So when I look at the cultural shift that's going on right now, especially in this country, when you look at the Paralympic Games, and you look at some of the ad campaigns that are going on right now, amputees are finally being portrayed as these very powerful people.
Yeah, they're badasses. We are badasses.
Exactly. They go through struggle. They reach expectations that could have never been conceived. This is not something that is hidden away anymore. I wear my hardware proudly. I am not nervous about wearing shorts or being in an environment where my prosthesis is very exposed. And when, someone asks me, hey, what's this all about? For me, it's just about normalizing amputees and getting people to understand that we are just as deserving of all the same jobs, all the same opportunities, all the same relationships. Okay,
Right.
that we can be just as loved as anyone else and regarded in the same way. So when I look at everything you've been through with the Bachelor, franchise, and then I see your medical journey, and now I look at you as this sort of fresh, brand new baby bird amputee, right?
Yep.
Because you're just here now,
Yep.
and I think this is someone that is going to elevate us. This is someone that is going to keep planting those seeds and doing the good work that so many other people that have inspired me, that led me to doing what I'm doing today, right? Talking to people, getting the stories out there, creating that advocacy piece, that awareness piece. So when you look at yourself in this amputee space, where do you, I mean, I know you're going to be doing the documentary
Yep.
with the church, so I'm super psyched about seeing that. But where do you see yourself going as you acclimate to being an amputee? And, what do you think the future is going to be like for you?
Well, much like just the overall journey with the amputation now and recovery, there's a lot of unknowns. But I think right now, like as you were just saying, the inclusion of amputees in the normal types of campaigns, and you even see amputees on American Ninja Warrior, for example, and it's starting
I
to
interviewed
become,
one of them.
yeah, so it's starting to become more normalized. So my goal, my aspirations, and what I truly believe has been a divine plan from God is to really inspire and listen to and serve as many amputees as possible, right? And whether that's having podcast discussions like this, next weekend, for example, the Challenge Athlete Foundation is doing a clinic in Houston where I reside, and I'm definitely going to be there. I don't have my prosthetic yet, so I won't be like participating in that regard, but I'm going to be networking. I'm going to be
Right.
cheerleading the kiddos, and I love pediatrics. So when I was doing lymphedema devices, I got to serve patients that were 2 years old and all the way up to 92. So I just have this desire in my heart to serve others. And even the Bible talks about too much is given, much is expected. So it's like kind of like with Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So
Yeah.
it's not that I feel an obligation to do this, to be an advocate, to be a voice, to use my platform. I see this as a blessing, and it's something that I get to do. And what that looks like, I'm not sure. And I'm obviously open to pretty much anything. We're having this conversation. I'm going to that clinic. I'm now very vocal on my social media, and I'm, hashtagging amputee in all my posts now, because that's now a new community that I'm blessed to be a part of.
Yep.
Several other amputees, Paralympians, and other kind of motivational speakers have reached out to me. So we have a couple of side projects right now that we're kind of in the incubation phase of thinking what it could and what it will be. And we're just kind of going to put it all out there and let God take this wherever it's supposed to go. So if there's any amputees that are listening to this, definitely reach out to me on my Instagram. I'm sure Rick will put the notes in there, how to find it, but it's Cam Ayala. And, there's articles on Google, just Google Cam Ayala amputation. You can see links to my social media there, but I am here for you. I am here with you. And I know that together we're all going to be stronger.
Man, Cam, what a great way to wrap up the show today. I can't say it any better. really just phenomenal stuff. And I so appreciate you being here today, taking the time. And, I am so excited to see what's next for you. And I would recommend everyone in the audience, follow Cam, because his story is going to be something to behold. It's going to be the stuff of legend. And thank you so much. Don't be a stranger. I'm hoping that we can talk again when you've hit, several new milestones and, continue to do all this amazing work. That's going to wrap it up for us today. I actually want to give a creative credit to Isabella Trickolis. She was very helpful in helping me put together this particular episode with Cam. My name is Rick Bontkowski. This is the AMP'D UP211 podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness. We'll see you next time.